you mentioned just sort of like in passing, I get to tell George Lucas. You have to tell me that story of meeting George Lucas.
Yeah, that's so it was senior year of college. I was studying at NYU. I was a film major there, and it was literally the second semester of my senior year, and they were coming out with the special edition of THX 1138. It was around the time, just a couple of months before Revenge of the Sith was coming out, and I was working at the video TV library within NYU, and that was also part of the job was taking care of like events in classrooms across the Tisch, which is the building we were in, the school that we were in. And there was a rumor floating around that Lucas was going to show up. And I went to my boss, who was a huge Star Wars fan as well. And probably the reason I got the job because we just geeked out about Star Wars. Her and her husband, I'm like, is it true that Lucas is coming? And she's like, I cannot say anything. I cannot say anything. Okay, so I go downstairs. I go to another one of my supervisors. I'm like, is it true? Is Lucas coming? He says, if I was you, I would be at this door at this time. Can't say why. Can't tell. But if I was someone like yourself, I would go to this room at this time for some reason. That was also the first time. That was also coincidentally starting at the same time as my animation course I was going to be taking that time. So being the nerd that I was stuck with a conundrum. I get to meet George Lucas, or I get to have to skip class, which means I have to skip class. And my grades are very important to me, so I can't skip class, especially the first class. So I might have to go not meet George Lucas. So what do? I call my mom because again, a huge nerd, and I'm like, Mom, this is my situation. What do I do? And my mom's like, she's like worried that there's a reason I'm calling during the middle of school. Right. She's like, what's up? And I'm like, Mom, exactly. And I'm like, Mom, what do I do? She's like, Adam, what the F, expletive deleted, go meet George Lucas. So I went and I met George Lucas, and I got a signed copy of THX 1138, which was in part due because someone there whose name was also Adam had it on him, and I just picked it up. I found him, like, oh, here it is, and he was very kind and he gave it to me. But the funniest part was I sat next to this guy, and I'm like chatting with him for a while. He's asking me how I got to school, et cetera, and then I'm just like, George Lucas, like, leave me alone, old man. Turns out it's Walter Murch. So it was a really weird day, and and the cool thing was I got to say to Lucas, like, not only like this, you're the reason I'm here, but my dad raised me on movie serials, like the old school serials, and one of his favorites, if not his favorite, is Commando Cody. And there's Commander Cody, and I'm like, I got to say, like, I get it. So that was a cool little thing. That's how I met George Lucas.
That's amazing. Yeah, and was he? I imagine he was fairly, when he was in an event like that, he was probably a little bit frazzled, as he always is. But it's always good when you meet your heroes and they don't disappoint you. And it sounds like he didn't disappoint you.
He didn't disappoint. He was a lot more laid back because it was a smaller event.
Right.
But what I think was most elucidating about him was he talked about THX 1138, and he talked about what the thinking behind American Zoetrope was, and what they were trying to do back in the time about fighting the American film studio system. And he's like, and in doing so, I became the American studio system, and you're just like, you're the film studio system. And it's like, I thought that was a really, really cool look in sort of self-awareness, like this guy he's aware of how much he dramatically changed things, and that was very refreshing. And he was very nice. I mean, I had maybe a couple of seconds with him personally, but it's one of those things where I can sit down like, hey, that happened.
Yeah.